My name is Mike Buck, and I'd like to welcome you to a demonstration of the Buck diesel engine. This engine is the culmination of approximately 5 years of research and development, and I think when you look at this, you will understand that this is the easiest engine to service and repair that you've ever seen. This is Dave, and this is Tim, and in a few minutes they're going to show you how quick and easy you can replace a single cylinder on this engine. Before we start, we'd like to crank this engine so that you will see that it is in fact a running engine and that we're not starting with something that's already been disassembled partially. And once we have run it for a few minutes, we will shut it down and we will remove a single cylinder. It really doesn't matter which cylinder you would be using, but we're going to do 4 today just for this demonstration. You will see that it is as easy to replace any one cylinder on this as the other, and you can rebuild the entire engine above the crankshaft in approximately 2 hours. Before we go any further, we'll start this engine, run it for a few minutes, and then we'll proceed. Thank you. For the purposes of this demonstration, we have already drained the coolant into the 2 red containers you see, one on each side of this engine. Tim and Dave will now start and disassemble the number 4 cylinder and remove it, and we'll explain the process as we go along. We're going to start right now and start to time it. You should be able to see it on your video clock, but we'll say now, we'll start. Dave is removing the fuel line. He will remove 2 for this demonstration. The production engine fuel lines will be made differently, and it won't be necessary to remove but 1. Tim is loosening the bolts on the exhaust manifold and heat exchanger, and you will see that it won't be necessary to remove both manifolds in order to change this single cylinder. We will loosen both manifolds and just separate them slightly from the engine and be able to remove the cylinder then. Dave has removed the valve cover from the individual cylinder, and now he is loosening the intake manifold bolts. On this particular engine, the aftercooler is located inside of this intake manifold. We're using hand tools for this demonstration to show you how quickly it can be done even using hand tools. But if we were using impact wrenches, it would go much faster. Tim is removing the freshwater connector from the base of the cylinder jug. These connectors are attached by means of a flexible freshwater manifold. This makes it easy to remove a single cylinder without having to remove the entire freshwater manifold. Dave is now going to remove the head bolts from the number 4 cylinder. There are only 4 head bolts. These are torqued to approximately 130 foot-pounds. The manifolds are separated from the cylinder heads approximately 1/8 of an inch. Tim is using a little scraper or screwdriver just to ease the manifold off just a little bit. The head bolts pass through the cylinder head and through the cylinder jug and anchor in the cast iron carrier. That's the base of the engine. The cylinder head's been removed along with all 4 head bolts. Push rods are removed. The cylinder jug has 2 tapped holes that allow you to use a couple of bolts to get hold of the cylinder jug. Makes it easier to remove. Tim has removed the cylinder jug. The piston you can see on the end of the connecting rod. Now we're going to rotate the engine slightly to get the connecting rod and piston closer to the top to make it easier to remove. The connecting rod and piston will be removed as a unit from the top of this engine. The rod bolts insert and connect to the cap from the top. Approximately 95% of the failures in engines occur in the top end of the engine, either in the cylinder head or the cylinder itself. And since all of this removes from the top, it makes service in a boat or in other applications much easier. Tim is removing the rod bolts, being careful not to drop the cap. But in the engine there's a windage tray under the crank that will catch the cap if he was to drop it so it doesn't go into the oil pan. There's your connecting rod, piston. And Tim has the cap. Looks like approximately 7 minutes or less. We have removed an entire cylinder, including connecting rod, lifters, and all. You can see how the crankshaft journal is at the top, and you can see where the connecting rod has been removed. And now we're going to put all this back together. We are going to use the same parts since that's what we have handy here. If we had new parts, we'd be putting new parts back, of course. But now we will begin the reassembly. Tim will replace the cap and connecting rod and piston. You could replace the rod bearings at the same time, of course. He's going to snug these up, then he'll torque them. There are only about 4 sockets used to completely disassemble and reassemble this engine. As you can see, these are socket head bolts, heavy duty. Now Tim will use the torque wrench and torque the rod bolts. Now Tim will reinstall the cylinder jug. The jug has a taper in the bottom of it that allows the piston rings to funnel into the sleeve without damaging them. Kind of like a ring squeezer, but it eliminates the need for a ring squeezer. There are dowels in the carrier and in the bottom of the cylinder jug that cause it to line up perfectly every time. There are also dowels between the cylinder jug and the cylinder head. Now that the jug is back in place, Dave is going to put the cylinder head back on. Yeah, we do need our push rods, guys. Now we'll make sure the push rods are under the slack adjusters. Dave is going to start to snug up the head bolts. All the gasket seals on this are O-rings and copper rings. Dave's going to torque the head down. About 130 foot-pounds. Now they will put the manifold bolts back in that head and tighten up both the intake and exhaust manifolds. Again, none of this removal and installation requires a removal of any pumps, belts, front end or rear end assemblies. Again, no belts. Only belt required to run an alternator. Tim is rotating the engine to adjust the valve lash. While Dave finishes snugging up the intake manifold bolts. It's not required to have an extension as long as Dave's using, of course, but it's the only one he had handy, I think. Tim is setting the valve lash. Now Tim's going to tighten up his manifold bolts. This exhaust manifold is a wet manifold for marine application. It also contains the heat exchanger, which is a water-to-water exchanger, raw water to fresh water. Dave's got the valve cover back on it, and now he's putting the fuel lines back. Normally these high pressure fuel lines would be replaced. Most manufacturers recommend they be replaced when they're removed so that the end seal is fresh each time. This rail runs about 30,000 pounds per square inch, so it requires a good seal. Tim is reconnecting the freshwater connector to the base of the cylinder jug on number 4. And so now they are complete. It's taken about 20 minutes. And now we will put coolant back in it and prepare to start it. Once the coolant is back in the engine, we will bleed the fuel lines. That'll require loosening them and turning the engine over briefly to get the fuel lines clear of air. And then we will restart it. We have a manual start switch here hooked to the engine. Makes it a little easier. You could just go to the ignition switch. And now we will restart the engine. It may take a little bit longer to crank this time due to additional air that's still in the system, but we will start it back up. As you can see, it took us less than 20 minutes to remove a single cylinder piston, connecting rod, rod bearing, lifters, push rods, and replace it. You could actually carry parts with you in a lot of situations and do this type of work wherever you might be. Marine applications for this engine, working from the top, are always going to be easier than a more conventionally designed engine. The main problems that occur in engines or the majority of the problems that occur, I should say, occur in the upper end of the engine. It's usually the piston, the rings, the cylinder head, wrist pin bushing. And since most of the problems occur in the upper end of the engine, replacing the cylinders in the upper end quickly and easily is a tremendous benefit. Your operational cost should go down. Your downtime is certainly going to be reduced. And we would like to thank you for taking the time to view this video. All of us here at Buck Diesel want to invite you to go to our website, which is buckdiesel.com, and you can read all about this engine, the additional benefits, a lot of benefits we haven't mentioned today. Our contact information is there. If there's additional information you need, feel free to contact us either by email or phone. And again, thank you for taking time to view this video.